Hey guys, Andy here from Mediocre Hobbies, bringing you, well, Fulgrim, the Phoenician. The beautiful new Fulgrim Ascended miniature from Games Workshop, very kindly sent me out by them for testing and to make some videos for you guys and show you what I think of them. So, this guy seems to have a lot of the community worried about things like how the hell am I going to build him, how the hell am I going to transport him, how the hell am I going to paint him, and what it's going to be like to use him on a tabletop. He's so big, he's so awkward, he's so fragile, and he's supposed to be this big thing of perfection. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So I want to go through that step by step with you guys, and hopefully by the end of this, show you guys how to have a beautiful Fulgrim miniature without too much stress and worry. Even my most kind of positive friends, when they hear that I'm going to be working on a Fulgrim, the first thing that sprouts into their mind is, oof, good luck. I guess a lot of people are worried about this model, so yeah. Hopefully with this video, I can help any of you people out there who are worried about getting this model to get them built, painted, and on the tabletop. As for how to transport this model, which seems to be a huge topic of conversation, people are totally worried about how the hell am I going to get this model around. We make do. We have knight armies. Knight armies are a pain in the backside, but people bring 5-6 knights to tables and games all the time, tournaments around the world. They make it work. I would much rather they consider making the best looking models possible than have that consideration in their back mind of like, oh, we could design it like this. Oh, but how are people going to transport? Oh, you're right. Let's make it small and cramped and fold it in on itself so it's easy for people to put in a case. No, I want to make it as big and bold and beautiful as possible, and then we'll figure out how to get it from point A to point B to play games. That's just my personal opinion on it. Hate me, love me, whatever you want to do with that information. That's just how I feel. Okay, without further ado, let's try and get a very easy, quick, and accessible paint job on this miniature and make him look as good as possible. So, wish me luck. And here he is, the Phoenician Fulgrim, Lord of the Emperor's Children. He is a monstrous miniature, there's no doubt about that. He stands very tall, especially with his wings in the pose that they are in. He is a very imposing piece on the tabletop. As you can see in this video, he is already constructed. If I had known the experience I was going to have in constructing him, perhaps I would have recorded it just so I could complain about it a little bit. Because building him was no fun. A little bit of a pain in the backside, but we got through it. But unfortunately, we didn't get through it unscathed. As you can see, there is some gaps between some of the snake tail parts. And obviously a model as kind of specialized as Fulgrim, I could not in good conscience leave those gaps there. So I decided to employ a little trick that I learned, which is, obviously you can see the big gap in between snake tail. So I have a pipette and just some resin taken out of my 3D printer. This is UV curing resin, like all 3D printing resins is, but obviously things like the water effect and green stuff world and all that kind of jazz would all be the same kind of thing. So I just pipetted some of the gray resin into the gap and then used my green stuff world UV torch for a couple of seconds, which will cure that resin, fill in that gap beautifully, and it'll be perfectly smooth. You will never notice that it actually happened. So there's a couple of points there. This bit here, I know it looks a bit odd here just because of a different color. So all those gaps are now filled in here. You can see it's rock solid. Obviously went around the opposite side. There was some rather bad ones here. Underneath one of his arms there was some, and just basically where the tail sections connected was a bit of a pain. So being able to just drop in a little bit of resin and do it was great. So now that the miniature is basically finished being constructed, it was time to spray it. I gave it a coat of Chaos Black spray, and then I gave it a heavy zenithal of Grey Seer spray. And then it was time to get painting. So this is where I want to talk to you guys about the idea that he is a terrifying miniature to paint. He's not. He's just like any other miniature. I know a lot of people out there are a bit nervous about him. How am I going to get him done? And it was a really bizarre thing, because a lot of people who are friends of mine and stuff have said the same thing. You know, it's going to be a nightmare to get that guy done. And I really wanted to challenge that as a concept. So the first thing I did was I grabbed a Silicanum Grey contrast and I painted all of his belly scales, if you will, that color. Took no time at all. Super quick, super efficient. Yes, he's got grey belly scales. I'm going to try and, like, I'll say dumb this down as much as possible, but just, you know, be as casual as possible with the painting process of this guy. I don't want anyone to, like, my nightmare is for someone who really wants this model to not buy it because he's afraid of it. Luxion Purple is the contrast I grabbed, and I got started with all of the scales. Now I'm going to use the Luxion Purple quite a lot across this miniature. I'm going to use it for all of his scales across the snake body part, and I'm going to use it for all of his armor panels across his body as well. He's going to be a big, beautiful purple beast. And obviously contrast on scales is an unbelievable thing. It does fantastic things with things like scales. Contrast was designed for that kind of thing. And as you can see, look how good that looks already. Unbelievable. And then, like I said, I'm going to continue on and do that across his armor as well. Contrast does dry extremely thin, so you don't need to worry too much about, like, you know, obscuring detail that's there. Once the contrast is dry, we're going to go back in and we're going to tackle any of the other little bits that we need to worry about. So the trim on the armor, or any of the belt buckles or straps and stuff that run around his torso, or bits and pieces like that. So don't be panicking too much about all that now. Just get this solid coat of purple on. Though this purple is like kind of the deepest part of the model, if that makes sense. Like everything, all the other details sit on top of this. So it's better to get a clean coat of this without worrying about the other parts. And then when you get to those other parts, they're on top of this, so they're easy to get to and easy to paint. And like one coat of contrast, I can't say how beautiful that looks already. The effect of the contrast given you is so nice. We're going to jump over to Black Templar now. There's a couple of bits and pieces on this miniature that require some Black Templar contrast. He's got this big black sleeve on one of his arms for Slanesh reasons. And then there's a few other bits and pieces like the spiked tips on all the wing membranes go black. His tail spike goes black, and there's basically just spikes and stuff all over him. So try and find all those and get them done with a coat of black. And then he has basically got this like double cape thing flowing down from behind him. The fabric of that is actually black as well. So I'm just going to knock that in with a base coat of that. Obviously, I glued this entire miniature together as one piece before I started painting it. If I could go back, I would have left the wings off. And it's not because it was difficult to hold or difficult to paint or any of that jazz. Just because so much of the time the wing was the closest part to the camera, which means the camera wanted to focus on that, which means I lost quite a lot of footage to me being silly. So very stupid. So what are you going to do? I think I managed to make it work though. Okay, next is going to be the most tedious stage of painting this guy, and that is the Retributor Armor Gold. Primarchs love gold. Every Primarch that I've painted has required quite a large amount of time of me painting a gold trim, and Fulgrim is by no means any different. So yeah, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to get some nice, little bit thinned down Retributor Armor Gold, a fine pointed brush, and I'm going to set aside about 40 minutes to an hour of my life. And I'm going to paint in all of the gold trim. This is sped up footage. I'm not Superman when it comes to painting. I don't paint this fast, although I wish I did. This is the speed that I paint at, which is a little bit slower. But as you can see, there is so much gold trim on this guy. But it is one of the main features of him. So if you take as much time as you need to make sure that you get the trim of gold kind of as neat as possible, you're not going to try and hit any of that purple. You want it to stay as neat and tidy as possible. Because funnily enough, I'm not actually going to touch the armor panels except for a shade again. They're going to stay this really nice dark purple. I'm going to do something with pretty much everything else. But when the shade goes on this model, wait and you see this in a few minutes, and it dries, it gives this beautiful armor color. And I just didn't want to touch it. I think it looked fantastic. I don't think it needed any more attention. So I was quite happy. Then time to move on to some lead belcher. And all I did was base coat the metallic parts. You guys know the bits I'm talking about. Swords, any other charms and stuff hanging off them that need to be done in silver, and anything like that. Whenever we get to these kind of stages, just make sure you have a good look around the model and make sure there isn't any parts that you have kind of overlooked, because that can be a kind of a pain. Guilliman flesh was used for the flayed faces that he has built into his capes. I said capes because he kind of has two. 6 flayed faces in total. While I was doing this, I'd wondered, are they people of any note? Like, are they just 6 random people he decided to add to his cape, or are they 6 like old warlords, or I don't know. Wildwood was used to base coat in all of the belts and straps and stuff that run around the front of his body. Once again, this is a thing to be careful with. Contrast is something you can actually control quite well. Do try and do that, because like I said, I'm not going to be touching the armor panel of him again. I'll be touching the scales and all that, but his armor is going to stay the same. So if you make a mess of it and you hit the Wildwood on the purple, then we're going to have to try and fix that before we go into the shade stage. Some Screamer Pink was then brought in to do all of the trim on his cape. Looks at dual capes. If I hadn't looked at all of the images I could find on like the Nova Open reveals and stuff like that, I probably would have done all that trimmed gold, but apparently it's this weird pink color. Okay, now for my favorite stage, Duji Violet shade. Now this is the new Duji Violet, the 18mm one, not the 24mm one. So if you're following along, please make sure you're using the 18mm pot because it is a much thinner consistency. If you use the older one, he is going to turn out way, way darker. You might not be able to leave the armor panels at that stage and stuff like that. So please, 18mm, smaller pot of shade. It's much thinner and gives a much better result. Now with this shade, I'm going to hit the entire model, every single piece, except for his hair, because that's supposed to be much brighter. And then he has these kind of like 2 bushels of feathers. I don't know if you have bushels of feathers, but and they're basically on either side of his cape as well. So extra little details there. Even his skin is going to get a coat of this Duji Violet. I'm not going to put any other base coat on it. The Duji Violet shade is the base coat for his skin. And that does include his big, unbelievable wings. They're going to get left at the spray stage. And then we're just going to add Duji Violet to them. Quick, easy, and effective. You're going to pay attention to them and make sure that doesn't pool, which can be a little bit difficult because they're such a large areas. You're going to have to pay attention to them for a couple of minutes. But I definitely think it's worth your while. Make sure you're using a soft bristled brush. You don't want to be scraping the shade away, creating lines. As you can see how soft that bristle is. So here is the model with all of the Duji Violet applied. There are those 2 things of feathers you can see there in the back. And I think that the Duji Violet did absolute wonders for this model. I was so pleased with it so far. Obviously it's still very much wet, so I'm still focusing on those parts and making sure that I remove any of the excess as it starts to pool, which it can do. Resin is a porous material, so it can happen a little bit more than you think it would. I grabbed some Nolan oil and then I shaded or mixed it down, I thinned it down with a little bit of water, and I applied that over the feathers and the hair. That's all I really did to paint the hair, to be honest with you. I don't know why you would need to go in and do anything else. It's a little bit darker than it was in the images. But obviously the Nolan oil separated all the strands of hair beautifully, added a nice bit of shade. While all that was drying, I did go ahead and get started on the base. I'm going to go for my normal Martian style base that I do for quite a lot of my Marines. I thought this would sit next to the purple really well. Yeah, I think I'm right. I think it looks really good, especially when I finish it off. Obviously it's just a messy coat right now. But with the shade dry, like I was talking about before, look at that armor. I think it's perfect. I wouldn't change a thing. So I'm going to leave it as it is. And you guys can be the judge when you get to the very end. I'll show you some close-up images. I'll show you some really nice video of him. And you can decide whether you would go ahead and do any more to that armor. But as it stands, I love it. Okay, so now we went in with this light kind of lilac purple color. And we are going to be highlighting his skin. This is another one of those stages which is going to take a little bit of time. We're going to highlight his face, arms, wings, all those kind of bits and pieces we're going to do with this. It's going to take a little bit of time, but you know, bear with it. He is the Phoenician after all. He's supposed to be one of the most perfect examples of a creation the Emperor has ever made. So he's supposed to have this kind of flawless pearlescent skin. And that card's, I know it seems quite pale, but that's just the way, the style he likes. And it actually was just like a 1 coat highlight for this. For some reason, the way I base colored it, that shade, and then that 1 coat was like the perfect highlight to get it done. I was so pleased. Dawnstone was then brought in just to re-highlight the belly scales again. And this isn't something you need to worry about too much. It's just a little bit of feathering, kind of scratchy highlights across the stomach. Not a lot of people are going to be looking there or paying attention there, but I couldn't leave them the kind of messy looking Duji Violet shade. The shade didn't sit on the Dawnstone all that well, so the highlight was definitely something that was required. That's because the amount of time it took me to paint this model. At the time of recording this voiceover now, it is 1:05 on Saturday, the day of release. So I was officially allowed to have this video public to you guys at 10 o'clock today. So I'm currently 3 hours late. So I thought I would get him done in kind of a day, but it didn't. It took a day and a half to get him through. So I don't know why I thought I'd get him done in a day. That was very silly of me. When I get through with the highlighting of that, I went back to the same light lilac skin because I forgot to highlight something, which is that demon plate on his stomach. because it's actually a live demon. It's a demon infused piece. So obviously it's not just an armor panel, which I originally for some reason thought it was. So I wanted to highlight that up so it would stand out a little bit. Not crazy amount. It still blends in with the armor nicely, but if you pay attention to it, you know it's a little bit different. That's really cool. I then brought in some Ironbreaker and started to highlight all of the metallic parts of the model. So that's all the gold and all the silver parts. And all it is a few little touch highlights on the sharper points to make it look like the sun is kind of glinting off those bits and catching them. Under the pale lights that I have looking down at this guy at the moment, it looks like I'm just making the gold silver. I promise you that is not the case. Once again, you will see at the end when I show you some really nice images of him what the gold on his stomach actually looks like. I then did a slightly heavier coat on all of the gemstones. So the actual gem part, I made sure to basically put a solid coat of silver so that when I throw a contrast on that later, it's going to look really well. The Fulgrim is obviously very ornate. You want to take his time, especially with the big kind of winged feather motif, which is his Legion symbol across his shoulder pad. You want to get that right too. Some Ushabti bone. This is where I actually made another kind of mess up when it comes to thing. I basically got some Ushabti bone and I was dry brushing all the scales. It very, very lightly. It's just going to catch all the sharp edges, all the belly scales, all those scales, all of those with that. But unfortunately, this is me trying to film. I literally could not keep him in frame when I was doing this. It was just so silly. Sometimes you get caught up in the painting, actually enjoying the process so much that you forget to frame the model before you hit record. So I did miss that, unfortunately, but yeah, light Ushabti dry brush across all those sharp scales just helps to make them pop just a little bit more. The back piece is obviously what we're going to have to work on now, so we're going to go over to Corvus Black just to highlight any and all black parts across the model, which will be, of course, his capes. I'm going to keep referring to them as capes because he's got two capes. Edna Mode would not be happy. And then obviously you can highlight all of the spikes and stuff on the ends of his wings. I actually didn't. I left them just the shaded Duji Violet with contrast black, and I think they look great, so I didn't bother. But if you want to add a little bit more to them, you can. Rhinox hide was used to add some very quick highlights to the belts on his stomach. I think that's the plates that's actually holding that demon head on, perhaps. Don't really know. I mixed a bit of these two colors together, Pink Horror and Screamer Pink. And this was once again to highlight that the trim going around his capes. Looking back on this, I think I probably would have just done this trim in gold and made it match in with the model a little bit more. That's just personal preference though. Cadian Flesh Tone, highlight the faces very quickly. Just one quick highlight, sharper points, make them stand out a little bit. Like I said, this is the kind of model where you do want to put the extra effort in with almost all the parts, as he's definitely going to be a focal piece in most people's collections. Warp Lightning Contrast was the color of choice for all of the gemstones, and because I put a solid coat of silver over the top of them earlier, it means that one coat of contrast was all I needed to get a really nice looking gemstone, and he's got about 20 gemstones on him, so please take your time and try and find them all. It's like playing Where's Wally and give them a little color green. I added some white into the eyes of the demon, and then I put in some yellow contrast, Nazdrag yellow if you must know, into the eyes of the demon on his chest armor, stomach armor, codpiece, I don't know. Back to Black Templar, because there's a few bits that we needed to black out. So for instance, the teeth on the demon plate are going to get done in that. He's got a set of spikes running down either side of his body, so we're going to black in those as well. And there's some teeth running off his right shoulder pad that I'm going to just black out as well, mainly because they're blacked out on the example. So now it makes me think that maybe even his shoulder pad is alive. I don't know, maybe I'm just being silly, but obviously I finished the base as well. You can see it now. It's that nice Martian scheme that I really like. This was a fun exercise to get this absolutely stunning miniature painted. I am not a huge Emperor's Children fan. I don't think I will ever see myself collecting an army of them. But it's definitely nice to add another Primarch into my collection. Like I said, this is my 10th Primarch, and I do hope at some stage to own them all. So it's nice to have one that people think seems quite awkward, kind of ticked off and done. And it's also nice to know that he's not as awkward as people think he is. I have to turn him sideways to try and get the entire model in the shot. He's a bit of a pain like that. But I am super pleased with the result. I now have the new Fulgrim fully painted and ready for my shelves, my cabinets. You can stand next to all his brothers in arms. Looking fairly cool, I hope. I'll jump over now to some high-res images. Obviously taking pictures of him with his wings in the shot is really difficult because he's so far away. So I took a couple of closer images so you can see what he looks like on a tabletop. I definitely love the rich like purple and gold mixed together. It looks great. Grey on the belly, wings look stunning. Super happy with the result of this piece in total. Okay guys, and there we have it. I have completed Fulgrim. He's an absolute beast of a model. As you can see, he is quite large, stands a little bit taller than Angron. He's a little bit taller than Magnus, but not nearly as bulky as Magnus, and obviously he towers above all of the normal size Primarch miniatures. As goes how he was as an entire project. Okay, so I'm going to break it all down now and be completely honest with you guys from start to finish. So the construction of him, so the making of the model, was a nightmare. It was just horrible. I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. Lots of the gaps that are supposed to have like holes and stuff in them were filled in with resin, and these were like a known thing. It's just part of the casting process. In the instructions it has these parts redded out, like, you know, just remove this excess material or whatever. I honestly don't know what magical tool they think we have that will allow us to clean off those little bits without damaging any of the other surrounding parts. I don't know. I don't have the skills or the expertise. If anyone has any ideas on how you're supposed to do that, please let me know in the comments below. Now, I got slightly frustrated with the construction side of it. Obviously, I went into it with like a negative connotation. Like, I didn't enjoy that at all. The painting side was probably going to be just as bad. But it was the next day. You know, model was sprayed. I sat down to paint the miniature. And genuinely, I didn't have any issues painting him whatsoever. I know he looks big and I know he looks scary, but there's definitely a couple of tips and tricks in this video that will help you get the model on the tabletop and looking fairly decent without a hell of a lot of effort. I mean, he may look terrifying, but he's not. I mean, I had the majority of the colors on with 3 or 4 contrasts, bit of trim with metallic, a shade as usual, and a couple of highlights. You're kind of there. So yeah, I did not break any part of him while I was building or painting him. So he's not nearly as fragile as people think he is. Like I said, I caught him on tables, I caught him on my sleeve, I did all those kind of bits and pieces that you would normally associate with that, and nothing broke. As you can see, the only Primarch not painted on my table is the Raven Guard one, and that's because I fear that I'm going to absolutely trash him when I build him. He's terrifying. He is such a fragile piece. So he's terrifying. He's not nearly as bad as people think he is, so please don't panic. He's a glorious model, yeah. Don't let the size of him or the delicacy look of him hold you back from purchasing him. I definitely think he's something that a lot of people are going to want in their collections. Hope this video helped you guys out. I hope you learned a little bit about how to paint up Fulgrim in an easy and accessible manner. Remember, the channel is all about taking away that fear, and I know that out there's a lot of people afraid about this model, and hopefully I've helped in a small way to dissuade that fear. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you give it a like. Ask me any questions you want in the comments below. I will get back to each and every one of you guys. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please take 2 seconds out of your day and hit that subscribe button. It really does make a huge difference. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I'll see you in the next one.